Hey, this is former WWE superstar Al Snow, and you're watching John the Ninja.
Ladies and gentlemen, how you doing? It's John the Ninja live in the dojo, aka the Dojang, aka the John the Ninja Studios. And if I were to break character and tell you how my life is so interesting and how I get to meet and speak to the people I grew up watching or people that inspired me or had pivotal roles in the moments of my life, I remember 2004. I was at Blockbuster. I picked up WrestleMania 15, and the first match I saw had this individual wrestling for the Hardcore Championship. I've seen him in WWF No Mercy, but little did I know how much teaching I would pull from him in the future. Considering when I myself stepped into the wrestling ring, I did a copious amount of research, making sure I knew everything there was to know before stepping in and learning the craft. And this gentleman's advice, his teaching, really brought me to a place where I said, you know what? I believe I would be qualified to at least attempt to step into the wrestling business. The man I speak of has not only, and I mean literally, has been in the wrestling game for over 40 years, but he's wrestled, teached, and spoke to almost every considerable figure. Oh, it's mind-boggling because I'm trying to keep character, but now I'm breaking it because literally the vast amount of people he's worked with, spoke with, is just beyond amazing. Vern Gagne, the original Sheik. You think Stone Cold Steve Austin. You think The Rock. Then you go over to Robert Gibson. Then you go back to the Ole Anderson and so on and so forth. It's truly mind-boggling. The man I speak of is Al Snow. Al Snow has wrestled for almost every independent and major market wrestling association you can think of. He has his own school and his own wrestling company, OVW, where they still have over 11,000 episodes that they've aired live. And considering that he's not only wrestled all around the world, but he's giving back through the school and has continued to love and do this craft, it's just beyond amazing. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Al Snow. Good sir, how are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you for such an incredible introduction. I'm actually excited to hear myself.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Well, I'm in Philly. I'm in South Jersey, but Philly is my home, and I hold it dearly.
Sure.
And so much has happened for you in Philly. So, the first thing we got to get off right off the bat is, could you walk me back through that WrestleMania 15 experience? You had so much success in ECW. You were able to formulate the head gimmick because of what you and Mick talked about, and then being at the ECW arena, you went across the street and you found where the mummers do the parades, and you got the styrofoam head. So much good happened for you in Philly. What was it like coming back to Philadelphia for the biggest pay-per-view? I'm pretty sure in wrestling at the time.
Philadelphia and both boxing and wrestling have a long, really rich history in Philadelphia, and the fans. I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, the fans are a different breed in Philly. They can be the most ravenous, and they can be the most have the most energy, and they can be the greatest fans you'll never want to perform in front of, but they can be hard. They can, if you're not doing what you need to do or what they feel like they paid to see, they're going to let you know. And so, there were a lot of people that, both in ECW and in WWE, whenever we would go to Philadelphia, they were a little bit intimidated about walking through that curtain and, taking their shot in front of that audience, because that audience, they know what they want, and they're going to demand that they get it. I love Philadelphia. I love the fans there, and I'm eternally grateful to both the fans and the city itself, because without it, I wouldn't have had the opportunities I've had. And it's funny, a lot of people don't know, but when I first broke into the wrestling business, I said my hometown was Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Was announced from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Thought it sounded better than Lima, Ohio.
And speaking of which, could you walk us through, because it truly is amazing that you knew what you wanted from a young age. You wanted to do wrestling. You told your family 14, hey, I want to be a wrestler. And pretty much everyone, even grandma, was like, why do you want to do that? Like, come on. So could you describe a little bit of what your parents were like, and, just how your dad was. I remember the story of your dad saying, like, you can tell who's going to win this fight because who's fighting to live and who's fighting for dinner. So could you describe what they were like and how you were growing up?
Yeah, my parents were, they were great people. Of course, I'm going to say that. I mean, I love them, but they were good, uh, working class people. My father worked very hard, and just an average guy. Really, a good man though, in the sense of being a good human being, being a good person, and very kind and very generous, and my mother as well. Both my parents were originally from Eastern Kentucky, and down in the hills and in the hollers of Eastern Kentucky. Then moved to Ohio, and that was where I was born and raised. Um, uh, I'm the only one in all of my family that decided to run away with the circus. None of my other siblings, none of my um, rest of my extended family, from my cousins, nephews, and nieces, uncles, nobody had run away. Everybody had gotten what you would say would be just a regular, normal job, and then went about their day. And for me to declare, that I was going to go and do something like be a professional wrestler, I mean, they thought that was ridiculous. I mean, it was just the craziest thing they'd ever heard. Um, but it didn't dissuade me, not one bit. I had made that decision, and that was what I was going to do, come hell or high water.
And hell and high water definitely came because everybody that has gone out for a wrestling tryout, every school is different, especially now. I consider myself extremely fortunate considering all the other stories I've heard, especially your story. So you spend 14 to 17 years calling these different promotions. You even get to speak with these wrestling greats, these promoters. Even personally, my favorite was you got to speak to Howard Finkel because he was such a
Oh,
great
sure, yeah.
announcer. And after all these years of toiling, and finally you get your opportunity, you give it all in. You sell your car, you get your ticket. I think it was $250 to go down to North Carolina, and Ollie Anderson and Gene were doing a tryout. 35 guys show up, and it's just the typical protect the business, show up and work them to death, and then along with other things that you have to prove yourself to get into the wrestling business.
Yes.
When I think of the story I went through, radically different. As far as what you had to do physically, 100%, that was the same. But the treatment of you guys, especially back then, I understand having to protect it back then because, you know, this is a business. If one person messes it up, it could destroy us all. But thinking how there were people abusing that fact, like, hey, we beat them up and we took their money, instead of actually genuinely giving them an opportunity to join the school. Did you harbor any resentment towards those guys? Even though you worked with them later, was there any resentment at the time? Like, yo, you took my money and you really didn't give me my opportunity, even though I rose to the occasion.
I know I had no resentment whatsoever. Never have. And as I've gotten older, I understand what they did and why they did it. For one, they were protecting the business, and that's understandable, because when this is your only means of a livelihood, when this is your sole source of an income for you to support your family, well, you're gonna go out of your way to do whatever you can to protect it, and ensure that it remains uh, intact, and remains viable, and to where you can make a living. You have a responsibility as an adult male to provide for your family and take care of them. And so, that was why the wrestling business was so protected. And you have to understand too where a lot of people within the wrestling business come from, and that is that um, they went about it a different way back then, and that was to just keep everybody out and only let a select few in. And because it was so maligned, It always has been, and apparently it always will be. Even to this day, professional wrestling as a whole is still not respected or, regarded in the same light as other forms of entertainment, other art forms of entertainment. It's still the redheaded stepchild of the rest of the entertainment business, of show business, even though if you were to go back and you were to, over the decades of existence of professional wrestling in just the United States, we're not even going to talk about, around the rest of the world. Let's just talk about the United States and the literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands and generations of people who have attended wrestling events that, I don't know if there's much, if not any other form of entertainment that could match up in regards to the amount of money that's been made or the amount of attendance to live wrestling events that has taken place, on a consecutive basis, like I said, over decades, over generations of people here just in the United States alone. Let's not even factor in Mexico or the UK or Japan. Let's not factor in any of those countries and the attendance there. Let's just talk about in the United States. And when that's the case, when you're basically out there physically sacrificing yourself, which really isn't a sacrifice. I mean, it's a choice that you've made, and that's what it is. It's part and parcel of what you're doing. So it's not a cross to bear. But when you're out there and you're putting your well-being at risk, because you're going to, at some point as years go on, you're going to pay a physical cost for trying to entertain an audience. And when that very audience, or the largest portion of the population, I should say, look at what you do as a joke or malign it by saying that's fake, anybody can do it with that type of attitude. Well, you have a tendency to, make it a point to make sure that if somebody's going to want to get in it, they know the reality of just what it is that they're going to have to do and just how physically hard it really is to make it in this business, not just physically, but in every manner, mentally and emotionally. This is probably one of the more challenging ways to make a living. I've got to be honest.
When I was studying, I listened to a lot of your interviews. I read Shinsuke Nakamura's book, and I always remember Misawa, who's, for the listeners, there's a big wrestler in Japan, and he died doing a very simple move. He did the move so many years, he broke his neck on that move and passed away. It always occurred in my mind, like, no matter what you do, you really could die in this. So I always came to the ring with respect. But just to let the fans know, your workout consisted of 400 push-ups. You had to run 5 miles. You had to run up and down all these stairs in the stadium. And then you guys got the crap beat out of you. And I'm not talking just regular, like, punch here. I'm talking, like, literally, like, physical damage. It hurt to walk afterwards. So with all that, you still had the perseverance. It's like, you know what? All right, let's go again. And then finally, Jim Lancaster took you on, and you're his son when it comes to the wrestling. With all those car rides you had with him, and he was teaching you psychology, even though at the time you were just trying to stay up. What is a car ride you remember where you were sitting there and you're talking? It's like, hey, if the crowd's doing this or you're doing that. What was one moment you were sitting with him in the car that you still cherish? You're like, damn, you know what? I remember him telling me that, and it still clicks and still rings true.
I'd have to say every car ride. Um, uh, you learn something every time you're sitting in the car and you're talking and you're on those drives. I can't thank him enough. From trying, because the wrestling business isn't a verbal business. It's more of a very tactile type of business. And you really learn by doing, through experience. But where you pick up the little nuances and things like that, and not just about wrestling, but about life in general. It's in those car rides, and that's where you're really starting to learn and understand. And every car ride, I learned something. Every car ride, there was some revelation, some light would go on, even if it was dim at first. It helped me. It made me understand. And at the time when it was happening, I didn't realize it. I didn't appreciate it. I didn't understand it. But certainly as I've gotten older, I've come to realize just how valuable those car rides were with Jim and those conversations. It's helped me to understand where I made my mistakes in my career. And it's also helped me to formulate a way to better verbalize just exactly what it is we do and why we do it, to give a better insight to the people that I train, that I help to break in, or when I was a producer or what we call an agent for matches. It helps me to better understand how to lay out and then communicate to the talent what it is they need to do and why they need to do it, as opposed to them being focused on something other than what it is that the match is really out there to accomplish. And, all of that I owe to those car rides with Jim.
I was a part of one of the greatest matches I've ever seen on the independent scene. I was reffing, and I wasn't even wrestling. The one time I did wrestle a match, the psychology wasn't there. We were learning, okay, but there were pivotal things as a referee that weren't taught to me that killed momentum in the match. And Jimmy Raveman, he rest in peace, took me aside. He explained, "Hey, I know nobody told you, but let's get this in perspective." And he started piecing together psychology, and that was the first time it really clicked in my head how the story's told, how to read the crowd. Was there a moment where you felt that click? Because there's some guys it's like, yo, I've been in the wrestling business 20 years and it didn't click until I did this. And then you got some guys that pick it up a little sooner. Was there a moment where you finally understood the idea behind psychology and it started working instead of just being told by whoever you were wrestling, let's do this, let's do that?
Yeah, pretty early on. Um, you know, at first I didn't, for quite a length of time. First breaking in the first few years, I really kind of had an idea, um, you know, and but then it was when I was a heel, that was where I really started to grasp and understand what it was and how to do it. And because I had to lead the matches, and it really forced me to understand just exactly what we were doing in the ring and why we were doing it. It took a lot more time for it to really, really click. Like, I would do things and I just know that I was supposed to do them, or I knew, and I would listen, engage what I did with the audience. But it wasn't until I came really down here to OVW with WWE that when I started teaching the kids here, the lights started going on and I started going, that's where I messed up. That's where I didn't take advantage of that one situation. That's where, I shot myself in the foot. That's where I, went wrong, and I didn't fully capitalize on that opportunity that I had. With the time and with the experience, in the distance, I was able to really start, as I was teaching the kids here, I started figuring out just exactly where I went wrong, what I did wrong, and how I could have capitalized and maximized more on that potential and those opportunities if I'd have just been focused on the right things.
And wrestling is a lot of muscle memory and repetitive every day, every time, doing it over and over again. Jumping through, you've gone through so many great matches, you've wrestled so many people, you've been at different promotions. And one of my favorite stories is the Bruiser Brody story, where you and your buddy, you're about to wrestle, and it's like it's you versus Bruiser, and you literally just got beat up at another match, and you're like, "Hey Bruiser, just watch the back of my head." He's like, don't worry about it, just fight back." I'm like, "Yeah, that's not too comforting, my man." And The thing that we were taught, at least at the school I attended, was the number one rule is protect yourself first and protect the other person. All right? If there's something you're uncomfortable with, you can't do it. But if you have a situation where they're going to get hurt, you have to sacrifice yourself for them. And with that thinking, I look back at the stories of when wrestling was really everything is a stiff potato, it's a stiff hit. There's no ifs, ands about it. You can hit the right spots so it doesn't hurt you, but everything is that gladiator football hit. Where did the thinking protect the other guy come in to play? Because I'm seeing, okay, if we're doing a move, protect the other guy. There's a way to protect them. But other than that, it's just story upon story of, man, they beat the shit out my man, or bro, he had a broken nose, or yo, his finger wasn't bending. I lose the line of where it was okay to say, okay, this is fine, and then nah, we have to protect the person. Where was that line?
So you understand, back in the day, like when I first broke in back in the 80s, it was dramatically different in the sense that you guys are more physically abusive to each other these days than we ever were back in the day. We went out of our way to ensure that we never did anything to convince the other guy of what we were trying to do. And our jobs were to convince the audience, not convince each other. That was the art, was to be able to do what you were doing to sell, because selling is not acting like you're hurt. And that's what you all have been taught. Selling is selling the intent with what you're doing. And that's all we cared about, was that we were convincing enough with the intent to the audience, not to each other. There were those who, if you touched them, if you hurt them, they wouldn't work with you. If they thought you were stiff, if you did what we called throw potatoes, then they would refuse to work with you. Simple as that. That changed with the new generation because, quite frankly, the new generation not that many do it for a living. And as such, they have a little more freedom to abuse each other and then take a week off and get to feeling better. When you work 7 nights a week, today's Tuesday, I'm gonna go to the town, I'm gonna work with you, and you're gonna hit me as hard as you can, just so you can be as believable as possible. You think that's what the audience wants to believe is what you do. And they don't. They're not buying a ticket to believe in what you do. They're buying a ticket so that you'll help convince them in why you did it. The intent that you were trying to use it to win, not just hit me or beat me up. And the thing is, you're going to hit me, I'm going to hit you back. And that's fine. I don't mind. It's not the first time I've been hit. Won't be the last. Thing is, tomorrow we're going to work again. And then Thursday we're going to work, and Friday. And you're going to wake up tomorrow sore. And you're going to be hurting. And you're going to realize, crap, I got to get in the car and I got to go work with this guy again. And then the next day, and the next day, and the next day. At some point, I hope that you'll smarten up and you'll tire of getting hit. So you'll stop hitting me and we'll start trying to convince the audience instead of trying to convince each other. But if you don't, we'll just keep doing it. Now, where it comes into why we protect each other is because that's why we shake each other's hands. You shake everyone's hand. You say hello and you walk in the locker room and you say goodbye and you say thank you. The reason you do that is not for respect. It has nothing to do with that. It is because of the fact that you can't make a living alone. So to illustrate that point, you like to hit me really hard. So I'm going to hit you back. And we're going to work every single night, beating the crap out of each other. We're not going to get paid anymore at first. But suddenly, for whatever reason, the audience now is catching on to what we're doing. We're starting to get over, and we're starting to become the thing that's drawing the house. We're going to start making money. We're going to start making more money, and everybody else on the show is going to start making more money because the house is up. So now everybody else on the undercard, as well as you and I, are going to make more than what we were making, and we're all going to be really happy. Because of course, on the undercard, they can't make more money if we don't draw more money. But we're drawing money, and we're all happy. And then because you like to hit me as hard as you like to hit me, and I hit you back, well, you end up hitting me one night, and the timing's just not right, and you break my jaw. Well, I don't mind getting hurt, but I have a problem with getting injured. If I get hurt, I can still work. I get injured, I can't. And if I don't work, I don't get paid. Well, the problem is that because you can't make money on your own, you see, you weren't getting over, we were getting over. And we taught the audience that when we go in the ring, they're going to see it, they're going to see a fight. And they're going to feel like it's a fight. And now we can't stop fighting. We can't stop hitting each other as hard as we do because that's what we sold the audience on. And that's what they're buying a ticket to see. And the houses are up and we're all making money. But now you've broke my jaw. So I'm out for 6 weeks, which means now you don't have anybody to work with, which means the houses that were up now drop. Now all the guys on the card don't make as much money, and neither do you. And you can go work with somebody else, but for whatever reason, you and I were what clicked and why it worked. Now I'm going to come back, and we're hoping that when I come back, we can restart things and get them rolling again. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So it's bad business to not try to protect your opponent and to take care of each other. It's not in your best interests to end up basically killing the goose that laid the golden egg, because that's ultimately what you're risking doing, and not just for yourself. You're risking doing that for your opponent and for everyone else on the show. And that's why we shake each other's hands, and that's why we tell each other thank you, because you can be the biggest, most over baby face in the history of the world, but you can't get over unless you've got a heel that has heat. You can't be a heel that has heat if you don't have a baby face that's over. You cannot be the main event if you don't have the opening match, and you can't be the opening match without the main event. If somebody's not willing to do the favor and lose, and you can't even lose if somebody sometimes isn't willing to win. You can't do anything in this business by yourself. And that's why you want to protect your opponent.
And I find it so interesting that wrestling can be seen as a very individual, but it's always the company. And the thing I love about you posting, reacquainting these new generations of wrestlers and fans, when you do that on TikTok and social media, talking about the terms, it gives different light to the statements. Like when Rip Rogers told you that he wanted you to sell, the Hustler looked at you and said, "Hey kid, I don't care what you can do. Can you sell?" It gives the term its original meaning, and then you get to interpret it correctly. So with everything you've done, we're jumping to the point in your life you're at WWF, and with that, you just don't want to be doing what you're doing there, and you are married, you have kids to support, you ask for your release, and they send you to ECW, and of course everybody knows the story, you figure out the head gimmick. Could you tell me what the typical day was back then, especially while your children were young, how you were traveling, how you budgeted time? Because you are very, very business conscious. That's another thing I always wanted to ask you. How did you become so business smart and good with all this stuff you have to learn in the wrestling business, being indoctrinated in it, never going to school for it? You watched other people, and you definitely had some lessons to learn. So how did you feel out like, okay, I'm in a rough spot, I have to visit my family? Could you tell us what it was like back in the day before you finally got your head gimmick?
At that point in time, part of my frustration, and I developed a very bad attitude, was very resentful, and I shouldn't have been, because it was, I was busy pointing the finger at everyone else except for the one person that really mattered, and that wasn't me. No matter what it is in life, contrary to the popular belief in society today, you're not a victim. There are victims. There are people that, are, but most of us aren't. The reason that we feel that way or we believe that is because we feel that other people are responsible for our emotions or what we're feeling. And that's just not the case. Nobody makes you feel anything. They don't make you feel happy. They don't make you feel sad. They don't make you feel angry. People do things, they do actions, and then it's up to you as to how you interpret them. And, especially in wrestling, every time you go to the ring, you have an opportunity to do business, to make yourself an attraction, because ultimately that's really what the purpose of going to that ring is for. The purpose of going to that ring is to make yourself an attraction, to use the backdrop of wrestling to connect with an audience on the strongest emotional level you can, to where now they are motivated to want to re-experience that connection on a regular basis and in greater numbers. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And when you do like I did, which was focusing on just being a great physical mechanic in the ring, focusing on what I did, not who I was or why I did it, then you end up putting yourself up against the wall where you're very passionate and your will is so strong to succeed, but you've literally built a wall through your own ignorance to where you'll never achieve those goals. And so you continuously assume that it's because somebody else is holding you back, when quite honestly, it's you're holding you back. When I realized I was the only person that I could control, that I needed to change me, was when I realized that by staying where I was, the perception, because perception in wrestling more than anywhere else is quite honestly reality. And I knew that if I stayed where I was it was going to be a very hard climb to get in a better place, a better spot, to be more prominently used or utilized, and have more opportunities to make myself an attraction. And I knew I essentially had to go somewhere else so that they in the office could see me in another promotion and me being a star in that promotion and on their TV, and basically using that as a television commercial to motivate them to want to either bring me back, or the company that I was working for to now want to pay me more to keep me, or Eric Bischoff with WCW to try to pay to steal me, so that they could capitalize on me as an attraction and take advantage of that. And through the grace of God and my great friend Chris Candido, who at the time was Paul Heyman's right-hand guy, and we didn't know that Paul was working with Vince secretly. Paul went to Bruce after Candido went to him to plead my case, and then Bruce, they had rolled over my contract because I tried to quit, because I knew I had to leave so that I could come back. And I had to go somewhere and do what I was supposed to do, which was make myself an attraction. The problem was that in WWF at the time, I was floundering because I didn't have an identity, a specific identity that an audience could connect with and could relate to. And I knew that I had to go elsewhere to create that. And, and then everything fell into place in ECW, creating the head gimmick that I had suffered a nervous breakdown. And, what made it work, what made it connect with the audience, because it was real. it was my real frustration. It was my real passion and resentment, even though it was wrong, that was coming through in those vignettes where I interacted with the head. I was giving voice to all of that emotion, and the audience could feel that it was real. And so I say this all the time, that if the audience can believe in who you are, then they'll believe in anything you do. And that was the key. Once I developed that persona, that allowed you, the audience, to be able to describe me to your friends and family in a sentence or less. Well, that was missing. That was the thing that unlocked the door, was that I finally had that persona. And that's why it worked.
And just really briefly, how did you and Chris meet? Because if not for him, I don't think you probably would have found the gimmick, but not as quickly as the start, because he really went to bat for you. He was an integral part of you getting those vignettes. How did you and Chris meet? May he also rest in peace.
Chris and I met years ago on independent wrestling shows that we were both on, and we hit it right off. Chris was just an amazing person, incredibly talented, professional wrestler. He had just a love and a passion for it, had a passion for life. And like, if Chris showed up on a show, like if I were going to some show and I'm like, oh, another night, Chris will walk in, and man, I knew it was going to be a good night no matter what. I mean, it was awesome. You know what I mean? He was one of those types of people. And he and I would work with each other. I mean, and it just so easy. We have a thing in the business where it's either like a night off or like pulling teeth. And with Chris, it was always a night off. It was just fun, and he was so good, and I think he's really been. I just don't think he gets the praise or the acclaim that he should.
Him and Jannetty, and there's so many other great.
Oh yeah, Marty Jannetty too. Yeah.
With everything that's happened in the past, you've been in interviews where you explain what wrestling really is, its true form, and your frustrations with it not being taken seriously, and that led to you. You say you ribbed yourself. I'm curious why you used to say that about purchasing your own school, your own promotion, and I think.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm right or wrong. It was cathartic. It was a form of therapy, and righting a wrong you saw, purchasing OVW, and finally presenting a place where, like you said, this is a trade. You learn things here you'll never learn in school. Beyond, even if you go to a school saying, hey, learn how to do TV and producing and all this. So would you say buying OVW lifted a weight off you, that now you're able to set things right in the industry, or at least contribute to it?
I wouldn't say that it lifted a weight off of me. I feel it's actually put a tremendous amount of weight on me. I have I take very seriously the rules of the business, the ones that I was taught. And, like now each and every one of these kids that are in OVW, now they're all a direct reflection of me. Now they all carry my name. And that's a tremendous amount of responsibility, and a lot of work, to make sure that it's always the best reflection possible, that at no point in time do they go out and do anything that makes somebody go, oh, that's Al's kid. What the hell? I would have thought they would have known better. He would have taught him this. He would have taught him that, because it all comes back on me. Carrying on, the OVW's been around for over 30 plus years. I mean, this September we'll have our 1200th consecutive weekly television episode, which is, it's insane to think about. That's a lot of TV and a lot of time. OVW has been able to survive, maybe not always thrive, but it's been able to survive even after WWE pulled out and, you know, ended their relationship. And there are so many others that were operating as the developmental programs for WWE that were in association with WWE, that when WWE ceased the relationship, those other operations went under. They disappeared, you know. And this OVW has been able to continue to at times just limp along, but still survive. So, you know, I have a responsibility to Danny Davis to carry on his legacy of OVW, and make sure that it continues to not only survive but hopefully thrive in the coming years. You know, and now it's become my legacy. Now it's, you know, every one of these kids from even back when, you know, when I first opened up a school in Lima, Ohio, every one of these kids that have went on to have a career in wrestling, that's my legacy, and I take it very seriously. And you know, I want my legacy to be that, you know, OVW has went on to greater heights and has continued to be a positive, you know, influence on the wrestling business and on the younger generation of professional wrestlers. I want it to be an operation, a platform where young men and women can come and learn not just in-ring skills, but can learn skills that will give them a career after their in-ring career comes to an end. I want it to be a platform that allows wrestlers who have had opportunities and have been on larger platforms to have a place, to have a viable place that they could come make a living as a wrestler and reinvent themselves and get new opportunities with other larger platforms or the same ones again, because they can reinvent themselves and rededicate themselves and maybe reconnect with whatever they lost that ended the run they had with that major platform. And I want it to be a viable, thriving regional promotion for live events, that if you're an audience in this region and you're wanting to have that professional wrestling experience at a live event, well, I want you to be able to feel like when you pay your money, or even entertain the idea that if you're going to attend an OVW event, that it is going to be absolutely 100% worthy of the time, money, and effort that you invest in bringing you and your family to that event, and you get the experience that you wanted to have, and that you got a chance to enjoy yourself and escape from your everyday life. And that was what made it worth it for you and your money, just like any other form of entertainment. But unfortunately, these days, I feel like, you know, too many people up and down the ladder in professional wrestling have gotten too far detached from that concept of ensuring that the audience get what they paid to see and get what they, you know, and get the get the value for the investment that they've put in. There's nothing worse than to insult your audience, both their intelligence and the investment of their time, money, and effort to come watch your show. Nothing worse than to insult that audience in those ways. And I will do everything I can to ensure that's not the case. You know, and that's where I say I rib myself, because I now have an immense amount of responsibility. You know, not just to myself, not just to my family, but now to each and every person in that locker room in OVW, is that I have to, you know, make the right decisions, because my decisions can directly affect not just myself, not just OVW, but just each and every single one of these young men and women that are in that locker room. And that's a it's a lot of responsibility, you know. And that's why I say sometimes I hurt myself, but I love it. And, you know, it's still my passion, and it's an opportunity for me to be involved still in the wrestling business and do what I love to do, that I've gotten blessed to do for as long as I've gotten to do it. So
the goal, as you said, you want it to be national. You guys just had another TV deal announced, and what
yes,
you want to do is not just do what these smaller promotions do and just have somebody come in for one night, have a big event, and then that's it. You need the talent, the wrestlers with experience to come and stick around. Who did you have in mind to come and help the students, or who's somebody that you spoke with that's almost gun ho, like, hey man, as soon as the pandemic's over, as soon as I get an opportunity, I'm gonna come and stick out with you guys for this time? Because the legacy of OVW is always going to be the big four as far as my generation is concerned. I'm not speaking about
yeah,
generations prior to. I'm talking about my particular upbringing. John Cena, Dave Batista, Brock Lesnar, who you also helped break into the business with his debut, and Randy Orton, just monsters.
sure.
So who is a wrestler that you're hoping to bring aboard to help the new talent?
I've got one, you know, got them here. Doug Basham, who was an OVW original, and Doug has an incredible amount of wealth of experience with WWE and with, you know, traveling overseas and everything. And that's the key for me. Experience is everything. You know, they'll say, "Oh, well, you can't." You know, I hear this all the time, which is just, it's complete horseshit. But you can't, you know, teach somebody to draw money if you've never drawn money yourself, or, you know. And it's like, wait a minute, you can't teach somebody to draw money. They either learn and figure it out, or they don't. You can't teach them that. You can give them insights, and you can give them direction, and you can give them ideas. And to be quite honest, I'd rather have someone who has done it and then not quite made it, you know what I mean, to the main event or whatever, than I would somebody that maybe has. And the reason why is because a lot of those that haven't made it are the ones that have figured out what they've done wrong and where they've made their mistakes, and now can communicate that to the up and coming talent and prevent them from doing those same things. You know, you've got to, the best teacher in life is experience. You know, the problem is you got to mess up to get it. But once you've messed up and gotten it, if you're smart, you've learned that lesson and you won't make that same mistake again. And with Doug, you know, Doug is not only has the experience, but he also has the patience, and he also has the passion to really want to see the younger talent succeed, and knows that their success is his success. And that's, a lot of times that's hard to get a performer in anything, basketball, baseball, football. It's hard to get the performer to change gears and understand that it's no longer all about them. It's now all about the person that you're training or you're coaching or you're instructing. And their success is now your success vicariously. You know, and Doug does that great. I'm very, very blessed to have him. I have a great assistant that helps me with when I write TV. His name's Adam Revolver. He's been with me for years. And then I've got a couple people that I'm training to be agents, producers, which is a skill that's in desperate need and is in great demand throughout the wrestling business, because they just don't grow on trees. So I've got a young guy by the name of JMO that helps me, and agents, and I've got Maria James, who works with the girls and as an agent, and is learning the skills and things like that to do. So it's good that now I'm starting to develop and have a team, but I'm basically having to teach not just the wrestlers, but teach them. I have a young man named Aaron, who is the producer for our television show. I teach him, how to, run the times and such. And so when you come to OVW, you don't just learn to wrestle. You learn to, you learn all skills about the business up and down the ladder, which makes you even that much more of an asset and that much more of a value to the wrestling business in general. I'm very blessed to have all these people, and they all have a certain amount of experience. And I put people in these places based on their experience, both in producing and directing and performing the show, and also in the school and what classes a particular person will teach based on their experience of that class and the skills that need to be taught in that class. And you can have a wealth of information, and we live in a day of access to information is easy. But if you don't have a commensurate amount of experience to go along with that information, well, you don't have any real knowledge. And I've got a good team of people that are passionate. They have experience to a certain degree, but they are also open to being instructed and directed, so that they can continue to learn and evolve, and then thus help better the show and to improve the performance of the talent.
The one thing I do love about wrestling is its ability, no matter where you go, if you know the basics, the bare how to stand, how to hit the ropes, how to shoot off, how to grapple, you can, in theory, wrestle with everyone. You have a syllabus you painstakingly made, not only for OVW, but your school, where it pretty much tells the instructors, this is what we focus on. Say I'm green as grass. Like, I have no concept of even how to bump at this point. What styles should I expect to learn after the basics training at OVW?
No, there's no particular style. I let the talent or the trainees develop their own style, and what works for them, what doesn't. What I focus on as far as style is trying to make sure that I help you identify what your weaknesses are and what your strengths are. It's all about knowing those weaknesses and then doing everything you can to hide or camouflage those weaknesses and accentuate your strengths, and know what those strengths are so that you can put your best foot forward. No one is going to have all strengths and no weaknesses. It's just knowing the best way that you can capitalize on those strengths, put the focus on those strengths, and then to be able to hide the camouflage. I have made a syllabus. I've broken the training down into 3 different classes, and the reason I did was because when you come in, and like you're saying you're green and all that, you do the first and foremost, the purpose of the beginner's class is no different than when you've learned to read and write. The wrestling moves themselves are nothing more than letters, and in the beginner's class, you're learning your alphabet is what you're learning. And then as the class progresses, you're starting to learn to put those letters together to make words, and then having those words put together to make very simple rudimentary sentences. What you do is not important, and you're not really learning. You're learning the very basic concepts of how to read and how to communicate, how to write. So you're going to learn A, B, C, D, E, which are wrestling moves. And then you're going to learn how to put those wrestling moves together to make a sentence like, I see the cat run. And then you're going to make longer sentences where I see the cat run up the tree, or I see Spot the dog chase the cat up the tree. Seems ridiculous, but you're going to start to string those moves together, much like you string together words, so that you can make sentences and start to communicate concepts in the ring. The number one thing that I want you to learn in that basic, the beginner's class, is how to utilize the very basic moves and maneuvers, switches, reversals, takedowns, to communicate to me one thing: that you're using them to try to win at all times and not lose. Don't care how you go about it. Don't care how much you do. I don't care how little you do. But I'm going to make sure that you know your vocabulary, your cadre of wrestling moves are going to be so varied and so large that you're never going to not know physically how to do something or how to do it with another person, because I'm not just teaching you the wrestling moves. Really, what I'm teaching you in the beginner's classes is physically how to move yourself and how to physically control yourself, creating spatial awareness at all times. Thus, you can then safely move another human being, and you can start to tell those very rudimentary sentences together, thus learning how to do the essence of selling. Selling, again, I can't impress this enough, is not acting like you're hurt. Selling is convincing me, getting me to buy in your intent. You can do any move you want to do, but if you're not selling me that the idea behind the move is that you're using it to try to beat the other person or gain or maintain an advantage and thus possibly win the match, it's pointless. There's no reason to do it. I focus on that. And then in the intermediate class, that's where you start to learn how to take those sentences, make more complex thoughts and ideas, and then start to put those sentences together to make paragraphs, use those paragraphs to describe who you are in the match, who your opponent is, how that factors into the win and the loss. And then those paragraphs start to construct and start to tell a very basic good or bad versus each other story. And then when we get into the advanced class, that's where you start to put those paragraphs together and start making chapters and start really developing a lot more complex and a lot more deeper stories that aren't being told within the context of the wrestling match itself, where you really get to learn to communicate who you are in that ring. Because again, that's essential. It's no one's ever going to relate to what you physically do. They're only going to relate to who you are as a persona, as a character, and why are you doing it. That's it. And that's what we focus on, because that really is the art of working a wrestling match. A work, just so we understand, a work, the definition of a work is a con. It's a sham. It's for me to make you believe a lie. I think I mentioned the only thing that's not real, the only thing that's a lie about professional wrestling, the only thing that's quote unquote fake about professional wrestling is just the outcome, that the match is already predetermined. The lie is what your intent behind what you're doing in the middle of that match. You're not grabbing holds on another opponent to try to win, but that's what you're trying to convince the audience of, that you're not just simply grabbing a body part. You're grabbing a body part to gain and maintain a level of control so that you can ensure victory. And because that's the only consequence to anything that you happen to do to each other is that if you continue to do it to the person, they may possibly lose. Or if you have it continuously done to you, you may possibly lose. So a work, the definition of a work is to make someone believe a lie. And the only lie is the intent with what you're doing in the ring. And that is the most important thing that you have to learn, so that you can then, without that consequence, so you understand, without the consequence of a win or a loss, that it being preeminent, then there's no way you can ever possibly tell a story. And if there's no way you can ever possibly tell a story, then there's no gravity to your actions. And if there's no gravity, then there's no drama. And if there's no drama, there's no heat. If there's no heat, you don't motivate an audience to want to pay to see you. And if you don't get a motivated audience to pay to see you, you're not worth booking.
You touched on a lot of concepts, like when I spoke with C.W. Anderson and Dean Malenko, the art of getting the audience to get to you, to understand you. When you have a wrestler at your school that is ready for the circuits, that is, okay, this guy can actually go perform all around the world, how do you advise them on booking? Like, hey, if you're offered to go do this, is it still the mentality of like, hey, your name's not out there, take anything you can?
Yes, it is, because your value, contrary to popular belief, this is not a job. Okay, a job was, so we can make everybody understands. A job is where you have made an agreement with an employer that you're going to show up, you're going to perform a task, and they have agreed that they're going to pay you a certain amount of money per hour for that task. The great thing, the bad thing about a job is that it's just a job. It's just, doesn't mean anything. It's just a means to an end. The great thing about a job is that you can show up and for whatever reason today you just feel like putting in 60% effort. Well, you're going to put your 60% in, but you're going to get 100% of your money that you were agreed to, because that was the deal. You show up, you do a task. Didn't say you needed to give it 100% effort every day. That's assumed, but some days you're going to give 40, some days you're going to give 30, some days you're going to give 80, some days you're going to give 100% effort. But no matter what percentage of effort you give, you always get 100% of your money that was agreed to, because that's what a job is. Okay, that's the transaction. They are going to pay you for your time. In the wrestling business, you are not an employee. I know that there's been a debate about this, but you're not. You're an entrepreneur. You're in business for yourself, and your product is you. And when you enter into a business relationship with a promoter, it's a partnership. Promoter is providing you with a platform, a vehicle to be able to allow you to market and promote and to sell your product, which is you. The more you're adept at doing that, well, the more successful you will be. Vince McMahon does not make you a star. WWE does not make you a star. There are plenty of talent that are in WWE that are not stars. They've always been and there always will be. You make yourself a star with the opportunity that you're given based on the platform that you have, the reach that you now have. And then the promoter, Vince McMahon, capitalizes and exploits what you've done. And then you two together reap the benefits and make the rewards. That's how it works. And in professional wrestling, because it's not a job, you're not entitled to getting paid. That's not how this works. Your value is in direct relationship to how many people will pay to see you do that job in the ring, perform, and that's period. That's it. So if I put your name on a poster, we put it out in a convenience store, stick it on the window, how many people are going to walk up, see your name, and go, "Oh my God, he's on that wrestling show? I've got to go watch it." That's your value. If I put Steve Austin's name on a piece of advertising, how many people would potentially recognize his name and potentially show up at the building to see him? Lots. So that's why Steve Austin gets paid what he gets paid. If I put your name on a poster, I put your name on a billboard, I put your name on a television commercial, how many people honestly are going to buy a ticket to see you? And that's when you're given the opportunity, when you're booked on a show, that is an opportunity. It's a commercial for you to sell yourself and for you now to be the greater and greater factor in how many people arrive at that building to watch that show. That's what you're out there trying to do. Not have a good match. Have a good match that motivates more people to want to see you do it again. And that's been lost because now everyone now feels that they have to have a rate that they are entitled to get paid before they even leave the house. And nothing could be further from the truth. Paying your dues, okay? Paying your dues is not putting the ring together or sweeping the floors, or you just do that stuff because it needs to get done. Paying your dues is showing up, going in there, busting your ass, and making yourself an asset and a viable and exploitable commodity that is going to motivate people to pay to see you. That's paying your dues. I used to, when I first broke in the business, I got paid next to nothing a lot of times. One night I got paid turkey giblets and beer. And the reason I did was because I was plus one other match, or I was additional all-stars or other exciting bouts. My name wasn't even on the poster. So whoever showed up to that building, I was this much of a factor as to how many people were there, because my name wasn't even listed. And why didn't they list my name? Well, because nobody knew it. Nobody cared. You understand? But every time I stepped in that ring, it was a chance. It was an opportunity for me to now make that name mean something to someone, and therefore be worthy of being paid.
And that also ties into how great you are with all your, I wouldn't say extra co-curricular, because all of it is your brand. It's all encompassed. But you're wearing a collar and elbow shirt right now. You also have another clothing line. You have a comic book. Could I ask a personal question? When you received royalties from then WWF, or WWE now,
Sure.
what percentage would you expect? Like, say your likeness was in the video game. Did you have to negotiate that with WWE? Hey, I'm in No Mercy, I should get, this much. Or when it comes to t-shirts, I'm assuming that's all in the contract prior to. Is there a set percentage they want to say, hey, this is what we'll give you, and then you can negotiate,
Yeah,
etc.?
Yes, and you can, in your ability to negotiate is based off of how strong your brand can potentially draw revenue. That's it. The weaker or the lesser your brand is, the lesser the awareness of you as a commodity, as an attraction. Well, then the less of a leg you have to stand on in regards of negotiating a better deal. That's just the way it goes. And it's not, you're not an employee. You cannot, this ridiculous concept of, WWE fired this many wrestlers today. No, they did not fire them because they were never hired. And if you've used the time correctly, the opportunity that WWE presents, then look, just because your run in WWE ends does not mean that your career has to come to an end. Look at Matt Cardona. Look what he's doing, and that's all, because of the fact that he utilized the time, and now he's reinventing himself and making himself even into that much more. And at some point in time, it is very likely he'll end up going back to WWE, because Vince will see that he's made himself into a viable commodity that Vince can exploit, and the two of them can capitalize on together. So why not?
You definitely called Bobby Lashley coming back to WWE. That was a big call. I'm still agreeing. I think Cody maybe even closer to returning.
Oh, he's going back. He's going back. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when Cody left and everybody got upset with me because I was like, I thought it was great. I thought it was good. I've always teach all of my kids, leave on your own terms. Don't don't just take whatever they give you. Leave on your terms. Make your own way out, and that's the goal. And everybody was like, oh, how could you say that? How could you say that? Well, I'll tell you why, because I said then, he can always go back, and I guarantee you, at the age he was, I'm sure he will. And what a surprise! Yes, he is, and he's going back in a better spot than what he had when he left, because he has went somewhere else and made himself an attraction. Now Vince wants to capitalize on that. It's going to bring him back, and he's going to have a better spot, and he's going to make more money. You know, that's what this business is. And any form of entertainment, whether it's wrestling, music, acting, whatever it is, that's how the entertainment business works. You are never hired. It's never a job. You are always a product, and you get paid based on how many people are willing to see you do that job. You know, and that's why you get paid the way you get paid. And if the fewer that are willing to pay to see you, well, then the less you're going to make.
Now that we're on the subject, because William Regal just went to AEW, I feel you've had some tremendous matches with some tremendous talent. You've wrestled everybody I could think of, and a lot more I can't. But one of the overlooked rivalries I think you've had was with William Regal. I think the reason why it means so much to me when I see you guys go at it is because of how enrooted you guys are from the original style, or at least thinking. Now that, you know, it's wrestling, still wrestling, you know, even though people say it's a little different here and there, but you guys grew up very, I wanted to do this. I got a chance, and made a life out of it. Not just a career, made a life out of it. Could you walk us through what it was like wrestling with him when you guys were trying to get the commissioner spot, bouncing ideas back and forth? You know, I'm assuming it was one of those like, hey, it's a day off type of wrestling bouts, but what were some of, hey, let's have fun doing this, or what was that back and forth? Because English American styles, they work, but they're also a little different.
They are, and you got to understand, like back in the regional and territorial days, there were always different styles. You know, the style in Memphis was completely different than the style in New York. The style in Atlanta, you know, was different. The Southeast was different than it was in the Northeast. Northeast was more bigger men, slower moving, what used to be called groaners, where they grab a hold and just kind of sit there or stay there. You know, smaller performers in the Southeast, or, you know, and quicker action. Memphis was more brawling, and, you know, Detroit with the Sheik was a lot. It was just a hodgepodge of styles. You know, Vern out in Minnesota was more really, you know, more wrestling, a lot more so. You know, so everybody had a different style, but the one thing that united everyone and allows you to work with, like I could work with Regal, I could go to Mexico, I could go to Japan, is that understanding what it is we sell, what we sold. And I hate to keep beating that as a dead horse, but it was, you could go from different place to place because everybody sold the same thing, which was who and why. And, you know, there's a myth in the wrestling business these days that, you know, the business has changed, that you guys have reinvented the wheel. It's no longer round anymore. It's octagonal or hexagonal or something like that. Nothing could be further from the truth. In order for the business to have changed, to truly have changed, which it is right now because of this belief, it is changing. And that, you know, in the fact that now the talent are so intent on selling what they do, to the point where they've foregone selling who they are or why they do it. You can't any longer, can you describe in a sentence or less a performer? Be honest, you can't. Where before you could. Just about during the Attitude Era, the reason the Attitude Era was what it was because every guy on the show was somebody you could turn to your friends and family and go, you know, watch wrestling. There's these guys and they're A, B, C, D, E. You could describe everybody in a sentence or less. Can't do that anymore. And they don't sell why they do it. They just simply sell you what they do. And as a result, it's changed. I'll make this one last final point to prove what I'm talking about. And I think it was 1961, maybe 62. They had a wrestling show at Kaminsky Park on a Friday night. Buddy Rogers and Pat O'Connor were in the main event for the NWA World Title, and they drew 41,000 people. Now, it's contrary to what you've been taught, that only WWE was able to run and make, have huge attendance, but they've done that for decades. The very next night, they ran another event in Kaminsky Park, and they drew nearly 44,000 people. Do you know what that was? It was roller derby. When's the last time you watched that? Do you know why? Because they changed what they were selling. They no longer sold what they always used to sell when it was super successful. And as a result, it became something else and it disappeared.
Personally, to you, who is the biggest wrestling draw of all time via a wrestler that never branched out into anything else?
Probably either Hogan or Austin would definitely. Yeah. Both of them. Hogan's a worldwide recognized name. He's like Muhammad Ali for boxing. Hulk Hogan is for wrestling. And Steve Austin as well. And they are incredible attractions. And just through the vehicle of wrestling alone.
To me, it just feels like Bruno Sammartino.
Huge draw, but he was a regional, and not taking anything away from anyone that was regional, because that was, and there were innumerable wrestlers that were huge attractions, huge draws, for regions. There were rare ones, like Buddy Rogers was a huge national draw. Even during the regional times. Dusty Rhodes was a huge national draw, even during regional times, so those are a little rarer, to find those. Bruno was truly, without a question or doubt, was an incredible attraction, was a huge draw, but he was so in a regional area. He was never on a national basis, not to my knowledge, he wasn't. But then that's not to detract or take anything away from Bruno and the incredible run that he had in the Northeast. But he didn't branch out and go much beyond that, much beyond his territory.
There is a wrestler named MJF, and you quoted saying that he's good at wrestling as a heel, but I feel that there's an implication that he's still not a good heel. Why?
I think MJF's a great heel. I think he's one of the last heels left in the business. We don't have heels anymore. A heel's job is to do just exactly what MJF is, and that is to be the guy that you don't want to be, and to go out of your way to make your opponent look better than yourself, but still be respectable and be reputable in your abilities, and MJF is that. He's a lost, unfortunately, he's one of the last of his kind. And if people don't pay attention and adopt more of what he's doing in their own way, make it their own, then, we're going to, again, the wrestling business is going to suffer for it.
The most important question I always ask somebody is, what is the best piece of advice you've been given? Not one that you give people or something you over and over again, but something somebody told you a long time ago, the other day. Could have been a joke like, hey, don't buy a tour bus, rent one, or something serious like, hey man, just live and this is what it means. What is something somebody bestowed upon you that you went, okay, and kept?
Probably, and I say it all the time too, and that is that never try to change someone else. You have to realize how difficult it is to just even get yourself to change. So how much of a challenge would it be to try to change someone else? You can't control anyone but you. And when I was told, my dad used to say, oh, I can give you advice, son, but if you're smart enough, I don't need to tell you. And if you're dumb enough, you're not going to listen anyways. And you've got to be able to keep that in you. And that helps me keep peace. When I see people and I'm concerned or I'm empathetic or I'm sympathetic, I can't control them. So I can give them advice. And if they're smart enough, I probably don't even need to tell them. And if they're dumb enough, they're more than likely not going to listen. And sometimes people have to touch the stove to find out it's hot. You can tell them all day it's hot, but sometimes they got to experience it on their own. And you've got to be able to stand back and let them do that.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, truly a wonderful experience for me as a fan and someone that's competed in this sport, talking with the legend himself, Al Snow. Guys, you can definitely check him out. Go to ovwrestling.com. Check out OVW Wrestling. Every Thursday they perform. They are live. You can also check out Al Snow at the Real Al Snow IG, TikTok. I would sincerely 100% suggest you check out his book as well. And there's just a plethora of things you can do to find him online. Good sir, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, John. I hope you have a great day.
That was WWE superstar Al Snow, and he's done it all, guys. I'm telling you, check him out. So, as always, guys, I hope you learned something. Be smart, be mindful, and God bless you. As always, Ninja out.
Woo, baby, you listen to John the Ninja. Oh, your ears are about to go on a vacation. John the Ninja's got what you need.